Thank you for having this conversation with me today. Let me start with the Washington Post article that was published last week with indicating Prime Minister Abiy is bringing a new wave of hope to Ethiopia. So based on your perspectives, do we have really hope, or is this wishful thinking? What do you think?
I think for any human beings, I think it's a palpable, this is not just a blind hope. We are just witnessing practically changes that we wanted to see for many years. The changes that we wanted to be implemented in Ethiopia should not only come from abroad. We should welcome it when it's homegrown, however it comes. Ethiopians have been struggling for more than 50 years for some kind of democracy. The revolution came, another so-called revolution, the second republic has arrived, and we are living through it. The democratic system that we struggled in our lifetime, that some paid dearly, and that others exiled, never manifested in a democratic change that we wanted to see. But that democratic change today seemed to come from a person from our generation who lived through, struggled, and paid in his family's death within his family. His older brother was killed during the revolution, and he happens to be a member of the current ruling party. But at the same time, the things that he started to implement within even few weeks, yeah. the calamity that calmed down, that was actually raining down in the country, is palpable. You can see it, and the world leaders understands that, and I think that's what the article reflects. And so for us, for Ethiopians, I think we should be glad, and we should seize this opportunity so that we can make this a reality. I don't think we should nitpick at this very moment and become the negative or the dark forces of history, trying to extinguish this light that we see flickering. I think we have to give it more fuel. We have to help it. We have to be instrument of change. And I think for me, to be alive and to witness this personality to appear is the most, I couldn't tell you how lucky I feel. And we all know and discuss about this, that it didn't just happen because the guy is a nice guy. It happened, he was born through the struggle, whichever side he is from. So I think this is a very important time. Yes, change is coming, but where that change will lead us, I think it's a collective decision that we have to decide where we would like to be in that process.
Okay, Eskinder.
Okay, well, on my part, well said, by the way. Well, on my part, I think, the catchphrase, the catchword would be that we're cautiously optimistic, yeah. Because this is, and I did not invent this word, but I have heard this word on the air, and I think, that too reflects my opinion. Because here is a man of paradox. Because on the one hand, he comes from intelligence. He has served in intelligence, and he has served in the military, and like Elias just said, he was in the party. He was a loyalist in the party, and then he suddenly comes and proclaims and fights for change. Does he mean it? I hope so. That there is no reason why we should not give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay. I think he should be given the benefit of the doubt, but unless he delivers on his promises, ultimately he'll be measured by what he does, not by what he says. We should measure him by his actions, and in this regard, he's been there for what, 2 months now?
Yeah.
Almost 2 months, yeah. And in these 2 months, let me ask you a question: shouldn't he have at least lifted the state of emergency? Let alone the other.
Of course.
There's so many things that need to be done. And how should we you know, how should we view this?
Yeah.
So you know, there are some questions that you know that begs answering.
Exactly. I think this is a very important question. So I think 2 months is a short period of time.
Okay.
Actually, this is very widely said that this is his honeymoon period. Obama lost his honeymoon period before making the changes that he should have made. That's why he's being blamed for many things that were not made possible in his time. So you have, as a new governing body in any nation, I think you have to use that honeymoon period, because you are welcomed by your opponent, because nobody knows where you are going to take the nation. And Dr. Abiy has that opportunity now. So there are many things that he has been saying, and I think I'm in agreement with most of his speeches. I love his speeches. But at the same time, as he says, that we all are cautiously optimistic, because of that our optimism is born from our frustrations and many undemocratic acts that we have lived through. So I think the next major thing that he needs to do is lift the emergency actions, and also many other things. There are political prisoners there who are still in prison, and so all those things need to be taken care of. But we shouldn't automatically reject them. That's where I was actually going.
I'm sorry. Let me add one more thing that you said. You know, this honeymoon period that he should be out. Yes, I think any leader of a nation deserves at least 100 days. You know, for a grace period where he should be allowed. You know, this he should be given this goodwill from the public in the first 100 days. He hasn't completed these 100 days, but he's coming close to it. I suggested this state of emergency thing because we would have expected him to do something by now. Even though he has the 100 days, there must have been some things that he should have done now. He has done nothing up to now. He's just he's still engaged in public relations, and that's cause for worry, I think.
I hear a lot of critics and supporters of Prime Minister Abiy. Some are saying that let's give him at least 3 months, 6 months. He'll make meaningful implementation, meaningful change. And there are other camps that says let's give him a longer period of time. At least 1 year or 2 years. So within those, whether he makes meaningful changes within a short period of time or within that 2-year period mark, what type of changes do you expect him to fulfill or to implement?
The things that needs attention from this government is not going to give us much time.
Okay.
So the government or the new prime minister has to make major implements immediately. I think Ethiopia needs immediate change implementations policy-wise. There are many global. We are concerned about the local issues, the domestic issues, because we are concerned. But if you see the global alliances shifting in the area, I think the prime minister needed to travel around the region and made sure that there is a new sheriff in the area, and that allegiance and alliances needed to be taken care of. I think that what he has done in the past couple of months have been very, very critical. I have been a silent observer. This is my first time that I'm speaking about this issue. And I think what he has done in the regional meetings are very important. And you have to solidify those alliances and relationships. Number one, okay, that's settled. And another thing is, within the nation, Ethiopia has been divided in the last 27 years. What we have created in the last 27 years took Ethiopia 100 years back. And the speeches that he gave, or the presentations he made in these different regions, and the reassurances that was, I think, unheard of, unexpected. I think what he has done is that what Meles has done, he undid those things in a way of his speeches. I think I'm talking about rhetorics. I didn't see the implementation. So this is a good beginning. But I think going forward now, as I said earlier, that the domestic issues is not going to wait on him. It needs major implementations, including what Eskinder mentioned earlier, that this law that they implemented in the nation really stifled any kind of democratic action has to be lifted. lifted. And number one is that. The other things I think needs to be done is that the oppositions or the opposition parties needs to continue the struggle within Ethiopia and outside Ethiopia. And I don't think that shouldn't be paused. It should intensify, so that we can also help the side that democratization should take in the country, but at the same time, so that the ruling party, I don't want the ruling party to get an idea that everything is done because of all this, wonderful speeches. So I think that has to be also taken part with the same kind of processes. I don't think this is the time for us just to sit and wait for things to be implemented from 6 kilo or 4 kilo and given back to us.
All right, let me first tackle the first part of the question, which is, should he be given more than 100 days?
Yeah.
And at least on my regard, it's definitely no, because change is not about the Prime Minister. The change is not about the Prime Minister. There's an impending change in the country, not because the Prime Minister wants it, but because the people have demanded it. So he has come conceding that the APRDF should respond positively to that change. So if the Prime Minister does not move, does not move in the direction of change, the people will come out demanding change. So this is not, the change agenda is not about the Prime Minister. Okay. We have accepted the Prime Minister in good faith, because we see him conceding that the public, that the public's demand should be met by the APRDF. But if he delays change, the people will come out that those changes are demanding. So this is very important. This should be underlined. This is not about whether the Prime Minister wants change or not. We will have change because the public wants change. We want change, and we have waited 3 decades to come to this moment. So there's an accumulated, there's this whole series of events that have happened in 3 decades that have brought us to this point. It's not because of Abiy that we are at the point that we are. So I think this should be stressed for those people who say that he needs more time than 100 days. They should understand that people are impatient for change. And then what should he do? What should he do to bring this change, to actualize the change that the people are demanding? I think there's only one way that this question could be answered, and that's to call on all-inclusive dialogue. Now, this is the only way that Ethiopia could have a peaceful transition to democracy. The only way. There's no second alternative. Now, by all-inclusive dialogue, this is not something we have invented. There's no genius amongst us who came up with this idea of all-inclusive dialogue. This also should be underlined. By all-inclusive dialogue, by all-inclusive, we mean that we should adopt the system. We should adopt the methodology, the transition that happened in South Africa. We're calling, we're calling for the dialogue, for the process that took place in South Africa to come to Ethiopia. Now, this methodology, this transition that happened in South Africa, has brought peace to a very polarized country in Southern Africa. But it didn't stop there. Then it was adopted in Asia, then it was adopted in Latin America, then it was adopted in many other African countries, and it has worked. So the possibility that the system, that this methodology, the probability that it would come to our country and that it would work is very high. So this is a tested method, that we want to bring into our country and try. And what do we mean by an all-inclusive dialogue? We mean an inclusive, a dialogue between all political parties and the APRDF. So we envision a system, a post-EPRDF system, democratic space, in which the EPRDF too will have space, will be able to function. There's space for the EPRDF. This is not something that will come against the EPRDF. We're not, this is not about the EPRDF. This is about a process that will have space for all political parties, for all shades of opinion in the country. So, and this includes the EPRDF, and plus, most importantly, those organizations that have been branded as terrorist organizations. And who are these organizations? This is G7, this is the OLF, and this is the ONLF. And so, this is something, that we expected to. What should he do in this regard? We want him to convince his party that this is the way to move forward, and that Parliament and the Ethiopian Parliament should call for this dialogue. First, he should convince his party, and the party should go to Parliament, and the Parliament should call for this dialogue, so that the process could be launched. And once we have this process, then we'll have the peaceful transition to democracy that the nation needs. And everything else, by the way, everything else is secondary.
Okay.
It's secondary. This lifting of the anti-terror law, the lifting of the civil society law, the lifting of the press law. All these are secondary. The question of free and fair election. All these are secondary. They should be dealt within the framework of the all-inclusive dialogue.
National reconciliation.
And then the final result is, of course, national reconciliation. But the process that will take us into that framework is the all-inclusive dialogue. But anyway, what I would like to underline is there is an established system. That the only thing we need to do is to bring it to Ethiopia, and by bringing a tested system, we will make that successful transition to democracy. The worst thing that we could do is to invent a unique way for Ethiopia to come out of this situation. I don't think that's we wouldn't have confidence. All the parties would not have confidence in a system in a way that has been invented by us, that has been devised by us. If we all look towards South Africa, I think all parties in the country will have confidence in the South African methodology. Not only all the parties in the country will have confidence in the methodology, but I think the international community will have confidence in the South African model, and plus, most importantly, the Ethiopian people will also have confidence.
I think what Eskinder is saying, actually, just to add into his points, is that what has happened in '91 with the EPRDF transition into power is that we didn't get an opportunity to pause and exercise what has happened 17 years before that. The Ethiopian revolution, the killing of the political parties, the dismantling of the student movement into the Derg period, all that transitions, we didn't get a chance to. And to eradicate or to solve that problem, we jump into '91. And of course, '91 didn't solve that issue, and it accumulated all the problems that we have. And I think we have to go back, and through this dialogue he's talking about, I think we have to exorcise the demons that has been plaguing Ethiopia. And I think this is a very important time to undertake that. I think we hope that we won't lose another opportunity for healing and for taking Ethiopia to the next space that it should be.
I'm sorry, let me add one more thing, because the reconciliation is one part of the dialogue. A no less important aspect of the dialogue is to create the democratic order. It's to lay the groundwork for democracy.
Yeah.
That's different than the reconciliation. The reconciliation is to create the climate where democracy is enabled. But then we have the concrete. We have to lay the groundwork for democracy. And this, the dialogue. What the dialogue did was, it brought into the process. It brought all the parties in the country to a roundtable conference. Now they debated, they negotiated, and then they had an election for a constituent assembly here. This constituent assembly in the finals, finally will have, will be given responsibility to frame a constitution under which free and fair election will be held. So there's two parts of this dialogue. One is to lay the groundwork for democracy, and there's the reconciliation part, which is to create the climate, the atmosphere to enable this.
The Western policy analysts from the United States and Europe, they indicate that Ethiopia is too polarized, it is divided among ethnic lines. Even the opposition, we talked about earlier about inclusive dialogue, the opposition are to the extreme and they were not willing to sit down and talk to the Ethiopian government. You think it's possible from the opposition side, they're willing to talk to the current government and bring about change?
Of course, they have to. It has always been the EPRDF which has set a precondition.
Okay.
The precondition has always been set by the EPRDF, not the opposition. So if the EPRDF drops the precondition and engage and is willing to engage in a dialogue with them, they'll definitely come. And if they don't, there will be the people to pressure them. There will be us to pressure them.
I think. The struggle shouldn't stop. I think we shouldn't 100% give our allegiance to political parties and secede into the darkness. We have to demand all political parties, whichever political party we support, we have to pressure them also, as much as we are pressuring the government. So I think that dialogue needs to happen, and I don't think there is a better time to have that kind of conversation to happen. For us, this is the right moment, and I think we have to take, political parties definitely needs to engage and take part in this.
If they refuse, there will be the public to deal with them.
Exactly.
There will be the public, because the people want a peaceful transition to democracy, and there is no better methodology towards that goal than the South African model. The South African model would reassure not only the EPRDF, but also the opposition that they will have space in a democratic, in a democratic environment, in a constitution, in a democratic constitution. So, unless they do that, it will be to their own,
On the other side, I'm going to switch gears and talk about if you look at the economics, CNN a couple of weeks ago, they published that Ethiopia is the fastest growing country in terms of economics. The West think that if there's disruption within the political stability, this advancement will not continue and create another crisis in Horn of Africa. So on the other hand, there are people who say, if you look at, yes, the GDP has been growing, but human development is lacking, from education to healthcare to unemployment. So what's your perspective and your thoughts on that?
I think if we think economic growth is sprouting buildings and maybe 0.01% of a population being rich, I think Ethiopia may be growing as fast as they're telling us. But I think the majority of the population is not the beneficiary of this development. And I think those are the things that needs to be dealt with. For example, Nigerians had a major growth in the 70s because of the oil market and the finding of oil, and see what they have done in Lagos. The government had to leave Lagos to Abuja because they created a city that they cannot even live in. And Ethiopia we're doing the same thing. And so we have to, the way the Westerns calculate those ranking is totally different to how we live and how we see things within the nation. So I think those things need to be dealt. So first, I think the Ethiopian, we have to reconcile. Eskinder was talking about the South African process. After 30 years, what the South African found out is that the process has a lot to be added on. And when we begin that process, we have to learn the mistakes that the South African has made. And for Ethiopia, this is the last, how many years that Ethiopia has been growing fast? 10 years maybe, or a little bit? 15. But if you go back to other countries and see, Venezuela is a classic example, for example. Venezuela has been growing in in an amazing speed because of, again, gas. But what is going on in Venezuela now? You can't even go across town or across cities. so Ethiopia should not be. We have to pause and learn from the other countries that went through some kind of economical growth. If it's not balanced, and then whatever growth that you think you have is going to be the result. It's going to be the result of. I mean, that will create the demise that the entire country will experience in few years. So I think we have to use our so-called economical growth for a better way, or we have to make sure that it's the way that the economy is built has to be decentralized than from one particular political party elites or a region. I think those are the kind of things that we have to think that it should benefit the entire country.
Okay, you know, if there's instability, the GDP growth that you spoke of will come down. If there is stability, there will be sustained growth. But does this mean that the people will be worried about the dropping of GDP growth and stop demanding freedom? Of course not. You know, whether there will be GDP growth or not, people are demanding their freedom. They are demanding democracy. They are demanding liberty. So, you know, people could not be expected. You know, you can't go to the people and tell them, you know, if you continue to protest, there will be instability, and then GDP growth will come down and you'll be hurt. And people will tell you, if you tell them this, the people's response would be, you know, we don't want the GDP growth. We want freedom. If the choice is between freedom and growth, if the choice is between freedom and development, if such a choice exists, then the clear answer, you know, the clear choice, and I speak on behalf of humanity here, not on behalf of Ethiopians, the clear and unquestionable choice would be freedom. Freedom. So the solution here now is not to threaten people. I mean, it's not to tell people, keep down your, stop demanding freedom, because this will compromise GDP. Because the answer, the solution to the problem is, give them the change that they want, give them democracy, and then there will be stability. And when there's stability, there will be growth. To sustain growth, freedom should be granted. So I guess the analysis that if there's instability, there will be a drop in GDP growth. So we should do everything we could to maintain stability at the expense of freedom. It is the wrong way for the West. For the West. And that's temporary, by the way. You could bring about stability somehow by supporting the EPRDF. Despite whatever it does.
That's what has happened for the last 27 years.
Yes, yeah, and then it will be temporary. It will not be a lasting peace. We need lasting peace for lasting, for sustained growth. So GDP growth is secondary. The far more important agenda is the agenda of freedom. Yeah. People are demanding it. They want their freedom, and if you tell them not to pursue it, they're not going to listen to you. We're not going to listen to such.
I think one very important thing that Ethiopians need to come together and create is the national interest. What is our national interest? Our coexistence, our economic, sustenance. The national interest has to be a paramount importance for everyone. I think within the political elite or anyone who want to see change in Ethiopia. The moment we define that, then we can take that to different aspects of our life, political, economic, or otherwise, and then we can build whatever we wanted to do in that aspect. But if we're going to be continued to be run by some distant country, that whoever gives us money might have been just the Soviet Union was in the Derg period, and now America or China. I think those things will always, their interest will always eclipse ours. And we have to make sure that our national interest is respected. And I think we have to go back and find out that also.
Yeah. We don't want that. Personally, I can speak on behalf of the majority of Ethiopians by saying that we do not want development at the expense of freedom. Yeah, this should be underlined. Okay.
My final question would be, as the diaspora in North America is as diverse as of Ethiopia. So we have the resources, we have the educational background. What do you expect the diaspora community to do in this current situation? Any suggestion, advice, or ideas?
Well, support support the South African model. You know, this is what I said. Like I said at the beginning of this interview, there's only one way that we could move. You know, that we could move to a peaceful transition to democracy, and that method is the South African model. Let me say something about the South African model, by the way. You know, this is such a vague idea. You know, people sometimes say, "What do you mean by the South African methodology?" But let me roughly point to what happened in South Africa, so that that this could be a reference to us. At first, there will be an admission. You know, a declaration, or not admission, but a declaration by the ruling party that there is need for dialogue, and then, like I said earlier, a call by Parliament, not the party, by the Parliament. For dialogue, for national dialogue. This would be setting up, you know, this would be government policy, not EPRDF policy, but government policy. And then, you know, and then does not come negotiation. You know, this is very important. Then does not come negotiation. Then comes negotiation about negotiation. You know, then comes negotiation about negotiation. Then through this negotiation about negotiation, the agenda will be set. You know. Once that the agenda has been set, then comes after that negotiation, and then comes the final outcome. You know, if we look at the experience of other countries, you know, if you look at the experience of many other countries, this process has resulted in the formation of a transitional government. You know, this is the most likely outcome of such a process. But does this mean that this would be a precondition for the dialogue in Ethiopia? No. There is no precondition for the dialogue. What the outcome of the dialogue will be determined by the negotiating parties. Yeah. But we know what the most likely outcome is bound to be. And once we have a transitional government, if that's the outcome of the negotiation, and once we have the transitional government, right, we could call it a government of national unity, because this will not be a transitional government that will be made up by one party, but this will be a coalition of different, or at least the major political parties. What that transitional government will be entrusted to do is to create the independent institutions that are necessary to conduct a free and fair election. So this is vital. You know, this is vital for a democratic process. It's to create those independent institutions. You know, what are those independent institutions? Is the electoral board, and the police, and the intelligence. All these have to be scrutinized and set up and reset up, not dismantled. And this is crucial, not dismantled. We're not dismantling anything here. Nothing will be dismantled here. Yeah. But they'll be corrected. Right. They will be readjusted to enable a free and fair election. So this is the process that we need in this country. We can't negotiate specifically about free and fair election and expect a free and fair election without overhauling the whole system. So this is most crucial of all. This is a process that will that the EPRDF will be part of. You know, this is the beauty of it. Yeah, the EPRDF will be part of this process. Yeah. And all political parties, at least the major political parties that we know of, like the OLF and the ONLF and others, will be part of this process, and eventually the institutions that will supervise the election, the free election, will be created not by one political party, not by the EPRDF, but by all political parties. So that's what we need the dialogue for. Absolutely. Yeah. And once we go through this process, we'll have the first and free and fair election in our history, and then we could all rest in peace.
EPRDF has a historic role to play in this process. As he said, that no one wants the government to be dismantled as it did in the previous several national leaders changing. If you see after the 100 years of the War of the Princes, Theodros brought Ethiopia together. Theodros's brutal death caused for literally the country was resetted to a new government, to a point where the British literally ransacked the entire palace, even to a point where the Emperor Johannes didn't even have the Kibra Negus to be sworn as an emperor. He had to stop the process. He had to send emissaries to go to London to bring Kibra Negus so that he can become officially ordained as a king of kings. And then what happened afterwards? The rise of Emperor Menelik and his death, and then the coming of Iyasu, and then Haile Selassie. All this, if you see all of them, including the Mengistu coming to power or the Meles coming to power, if you go back and see every one of them, we were resetting every single time when a government changed. When you reset a process, you are starting from the ground. And now, as he said, that I think we have an opportunity whereby we're not trying to dismantle, we don't want the country to dismantle its government and reset again. We want them to do a corrective measure. And I think this corrective measure of bringing all the stakeholders to come together and negotiate on the negotiation of how to recreate that country, how to create the next step is, I think, very important. To answer your question, how can the diaspora participate in this process is, I think, understanding what this was. And I think going back and rereading history and understanding again the opportunities that we have missed in the past. We have passed many, we lost and we missed many opportunities. And I think the most important thing that the diaspora needs to come to an agreement is that this is a most important opportunity that we have in our time. The moment you realize that it's an opportunity, then you give what you have into that, in whatever way capacity it is. We all are not politicians. We are not all journalists or activists. Whatever it is, what you think that you have, I think people need to come and give the best that they have, so that together we can build the country that we want to inherit we give our children's and younger siblings.
The worst mistake that could be done by the EPRDF and the Prime Minister is to think that change is up to them. Change is not up to the EPRDF. Change is not up to Dr. Abiy. Change is not up to the international community. Change is up to the people. We, the people, want change.
The life I live now takes me back and forth in history. And I had the most profound opportunity to talk with former presidents, prime ministers, and ministers or political leaders. And one thing that keeps coming is that when they go back and see the things that has happened, they didn't know that this is the result of the things that they did or they didn't do. So as Eskinder articulated, I think change is not something that is given from the palace. It needs to be, it needs to come from the people. I think Prime Minister Abiy has said a profound statement. He said that the country is that we borrowed from the next generation and we have to return it back. And I think that's a most important concept to develop on and just to do something. But always our actions has to be informed from what has happened in history within Ethiopian context, because Ethiopia's history and Ethiopian's life, Ethiopian politics is unique to Ethiopia, even though it has many things that it shares with the global community. So I think the humanity comes first, then it comes back to our history, and I think we have to understand our history, we have to study our history, so that we shouldn't repeat those mistakes again with a new name and with a new personality. And I think the more we understand that, I think the better it is for us.
And I sincerely hope that the EPRDF, will respond positively to this gesture. If it doesn't, it can postpone change, but it will not prevent change.
Well said. Thank you both for this insightful conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.